Jake Morrison stood in the heart of the memory core chamber as the consciousness of 50,000 years of dead guardians flowed through his mind. Around him, his transformed crew worked with abilities that transcended anything purely human, or purely guardian. They had become something entirely new, and the Devourers were learning to fear that change. The advanced Devourer fleet was retreating, but Jake could see on the long-range sensors that something much worse was coming. The main invasion force consisted of hundreds of massive ships, some of them the size of moons. These were not the scouts and raiders they had fought before. These were the Devourer motherships, each one capable of consuming entire star systems. Dr. Lisa Park moved between the crystal matrices of the memory core with fluid grace. Her consciousness expanded to encompass the technical knowledge of 1,000 different Guardian scientists. Her hands shaped new weapons from pure thought and energy, creating tools that existed on the borderline between science and magic. "I can see how they do it now," Lisa said, her voice carrying harmonics that no human throat should have been able to produce. The Devourers don't just consume matter and energy. They consume the information patterns that define existence itself. That's how they can adapt to any weapon. Commander Ryan Bell had merged his tactical awareness with the fortress's battle computers, making him effectively omniscient within the star system. He could track every enemy movement and predict their strategies with mathematical precision. "The motherships are deploying in a sphere formation around the system," Ryan reported. "They're not planning to fight us ship to ship. They're going to try to consume the entire system at once, including us." Chief Engineer Sam Carter was no longer entirely human in any way that mattered. His consciousness had expanded to encompass the fundamental forces of the universe itself. He was rebuilding the Terra's pride from the inside out, transforming it into something that could challenge the laws of physics. "Captain, I've finished the ship modifications," Sam announced. "The Terra's pride can now exist in multiple dimensions, simultaneously. We can attack the Devourers from angles they can't perceive or defend against." Communications Officer Amy Ross had become the living link between all of them. Her psychic abilities expanded to encompass not just the crew, but the entire fortress. Through her, they shared thoughts and emotions as easily as breathing. But more importantly, she had made contact with something else. "Jake, you need to hear this," Amy said urgently. "I'm receiving transmissions from across the galaxy. Other Guardian sites are activating. We're not alone." The main display in the memory core chamber lit up with a three-dimensional map of the galaxy. Dozens of points of light were pulsing in steady rhythms, each one representing an ancient Guardian fortress or facility that had been awakened by the events at Kepler 442. "The awakening is spreading," the last sentinel said with what sounded like amazement. "Guardian sites that have been dormant for 50,000 years are coming online across the galaxy. Other human settlements are beginning their genetic activation." Jake felt a surge of hope mixed with terror. If other humans were undergoing the same transformation his crew had experienced, then humanity might actually have a chance against the Devourers, but it also meant the enemy would be targeting every human world in the galaxy. "How long before the other sites are fully operational?" Jake asked. "Unknown," the Sentinel replied. "The process depends on how many humans are present at each site and how quickly they can adapt to their Guardian heritage." The Devourer motherships were moving into position around the star system. Jake could feel their psychic presence like a weight pressing down on his transformed consciousness. They were ancient beyond human comprehension and filled with the accumulated hunger of eons spent consuming civilizations. Little guardians, the Devourer collective voice whispered through space itself. You have awakened others of your kind. This pleases us. We will consume them all at once instead of hunting them across the galaxy for another 50,000 years. Jake responded with the combined authority of every guardian consciousness in the memory core. You made one mistake. In all your planning, you assumed we would fight the same way our ancestors did. All guardian tactics are known to us. We have adapted to every strategy, every weapon, every possible approach to warfare. But you never adapted to something the original Guardians didn't have, Jake replied. Hope. The word seemed to ripple through space itself, carrying power that made the Devourer ships recoil slightly. Jake felt the truth of it resonate through the memory core. The original Guardians had fought desperately, knowing they were likely to lose. They had been brave and noble, but they had not truly believed they could win. Humanity was different. Humans had spent their entire history facing impossible odds and finding ways to overcome them. They had learned to hope, even in the darkest moments, to believe that tomorrow could be better than today. Lisa, how quickly can you modify the memory? Core to broadcast instead of just receive? Jake asked. Give me 5 minutes, Lisa replied, her enhanced abilities already analyzing the ancient systems. Broadcast what? Ryan asked. Everything, Jake said. Every Guardian memory, every piece of tactical knowledge, every weapon design. We're going to share it all with every human in the galaxy at once. The implications were staggering. Such a massive psychic broadcast would transform every human alive, awakening their guardian heritage simultaneously. But it would also attract the attention of every devourer in the universe. The psychic strain could kill billions of people, the Sentinel warned. Human minds are not designed to receive so much information at once. But the ones who survive will become what we've become, Jake replied. And there are 8 billion humans in the galaxy now. Even if only a fraction survive the awakening, we'll outnumber the Devourers for the first time in 50,000 years. Amy's psychic abilities detected something else in Jake's plan. You're going to use yourself as the focal point for the broadcast, aren't you? Channel all that information through your own consciousness. Jake nodded. The memory core is designed to interface with a single guardian mind. I'll have to hold the entire knowledge base while it transmits to every human in range. That will kill you, Lisa said flatly. Maybe. Or maybe it will turn me into something that can face the Devourers on equal terms. The Devourer motherships had completed their formation and were beginning to generate the massive energy fields they used for system-wide consumption. Space itself began to darken as they prepared to devour everything within the star system. Jake placed his hands on the central memory core crystal and felt his consciousness expand beyond all human limits. He became the repository for 50,000 years of Guardian knowledge, the living bridge between the past and humanity's future. Amy, open a channel to every human settlement in the galaxy, Jake ordered, his voice now carrying the harmonics of the entire Guardian civilization. Lisa, begin the broadcast sequence. The fortress became a lighthouse of psychic energy, sending Guardian memories and knowledge racing across space at faster-than-light speeds. Jake felt his mind stretching to encompass information that no single consciousness should be able to hold. Across the galaxy, humans began to scream as their DNA unlocked and their minds expanded. Some died from the psychic strain, but others survived and transformed. On Earth, on Mars, on the frontier colonies, humanity was becoming something new. The Devourers felt the change immediately. Their sphere formation around the Kepler 442 system faltered as they detected Guardian signatures appearing on worlds they had thought were safely primitive. "What have you done?" the collective devourer voice shrieked across space. Jake answered with the voice of 8 billion awakening humans. "We've stopped running. We've stopped hiding. We've remembered who we are, and we're coming for you." The fortress began to transform around them, its ancient manufacturing systems creating weapons and ships at an impossible rate. But more importantly, Jake could feel through Amy's psychic link that similar transformations were happening at Guardian sites across the galaxy. The war was no longer about a single battle at a forgotten grave. It had become a galaxy-wide awakening, with humanity finally claiming its birthright as the inheritors of the Guardian legacy. The Devourers had spent 50,000 years hunting scattered survivors. Now they faced something they had never encountered before, an entire species that refused to be consumed. As the first wave of newly constructed Guardian ships launched from the fortress, Jake opened a communication channel that reached every human in the galaxy. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of Earth," he said, his voice carrying across space to billions of transformed humans. "We are the children of the Guardians, and we will not go quietly into the dark. The hunt is over. The war begins now. The Devourer." Motherships began their attack, but for the first time in 50,000 years, they were not facing desperate defenders fighting a losing battle. They were facing humanity unleashed, with all the knowledge of their Guardian ancestors and all the stubborn hope that had carried them from caves to the stars. The galaxy's greatest war was about to begin, and humanity was no longer running. The Devourer main fleet reached the fortress just as Jake Morrison felt the full genetic awakening hit his entire crew. Dr. Lisa Parks screamed as 50,000 years of Guardian memories flooded into her mind all at once. The pain was incredible, but so was the knowledge that came with it. Jake watched his crew transform before his eyes. Commander Ryan Bell's tactical understanding expanded beyond human comprehension as his brain began processing information at superhuman speeds. Chief Engineer Sam Carter suddenly understood technologies that shouldn't exist, his hands moving, over Guardian control systems like he had built them himself. Communications Officer Amy Ross gasped as her mind connected directly to the fortress's communication network. She could suddenly hear the thoughts and emotions of her crewmates as clearly as their spoken words. "I can feel all of you," Amy said in wonder. "We're connected somehow." The last sentinel observed their transformation with what might have been satisfaction. "The genetic locks are fully opening now. You are becoming what your ancestors were before they chose to hide." But the awakening came with a terrible price. Along with the Guardian abilities came the memories of the final battle, 50,000 years ago. Jake experienced the desperate last stand as if he had lived through it himself. He felt the grief and fear of the original Guardians as they watched entire civilizations consumed by the Devourers. "The memories are so real," Lisa said, tears streaming down her face. "I can remember friends who died 50,000 years before I was born. That is the burden all Guardians carry," the Sentinel said. "The knowledge of what was lost and what must be protected." The fortress shook as the Devourer fleet opened fire with their dissolution weapons. Sections of the ancient structure simply ceased to exist, creating gaps in their defenses that the enemy ships immediately exploited. "They're inside the outer perimeter," Ryan reported, his enhanced tactical abilities tracking dozens of enemy movements simultaneously. "I count 37 ships that have breached the defensive ring." Jake felt his new Guardian instincts take over. The strategic knowledge of countless battles flowed through his mind, showing him possibilities and tactics that no human military academy had ever taught. Amy, connect me to all Fortress weapon systems. Lisa, begin manufacturing Guardian, weapons designed for human physiology. Sam, I need you to modify our ship's engines using Guardian technology. His crew responded with speed and coordination that would have been impossible for unmodified humans. Amy's mind interfaced directly with the Fortress computers, giving Jake control over weapons that could destroy planets. Lisa's hands moved over manufacturing controls that began producing devices humans had no names for. But the most dramatic change was happening to Sam. His understanding of physics expanded as Guardian knowledge filled his mind. He saw now that human technology was primitive compared to what was possible. Matter and energy were just different states of the same thing, and with the right understanding, both could be manipulated at will. "Captain, I can upgrade the Terra's Pride," Sam said excitedly. "With Guardian modifications, our ship could move faster than light without using hyperspace engines." "Do it," Jake ordered. "But first, we need to survive the next few minutes." The Devourer ships were adapting to the Fortress defenses faster than Jake had expected. They absorbed energy weapons, regenerated from kinetic damage, and seemed able to phase through solid matter when it suited them. Traditional Guardian tactics were proving ineffective, but Jake realized something the original Guardians might not have understood. The Devourer's greatest strength was also their weakness. They adapted to threats by consuming and analyzing them, but this process took time and energy. "Ryan, I need you to coordinate a pattern of attacks that constantly changes," Jake said. "Don't give them time to adapt to any single weapon type." "Already on it, Captain," Ryan replied. His enhanced mind was simultaneously tracking enemy movements, calculating firing solutions, and predicting Devourer adaptation patterns. The Fortress unleashed a barrage of attacks, unlike anything seen in the original Guardian War. Energy beams shifted frequency every few seconds. Kinetic weapons changed mass and velocity unpredictably. Gravitational weapons created miniature black holes that winked out of existence before the Devourers could analyze them. The strategy worked better than Jake had dared hope. Devourer ships found themselves constantly off balance, unable to adapt to threats that kept changing. For the first time in 50,000 years, Guardian weapons were proving effective against the ancient enemy. But the Devourers had not survived for eons without learning from their mistakes. The main fleet began, coordinating their attacks, using their numbers to overwhelm the fortress's defenses through sheer volume of fire. "We're taking too much damage," Lisa reported. "The manufacturing systems are working, but they need more time." Jake made a decision that terrified him, even as he knew it was necessary. "Sentinel, I need access to the memory core. The ancient..." AI's optical sensors flicked rapidly. "Captain, that is extremely dangerous. The memory core contains the preserved consciousness of every Guardian who died in the final battle. The psychic strain could destroy your mind." "We need their knowledge and experience," Jake said. "My crew can't learn 50,000 years of warfare in a few hours. The process is designed for fully awakened Guardians. Your genetic unlocking is incomplete. Then we'll have to take the risk." The memory core was located in the deepest part of the fortress, protected by layers of shielding that had kept it safe through 50 millennia. The chamber was filled with crystalline structures that pulsed with soft light, each one containing the memories and personality of a fallen Guardian. Jake placed his hands on the central crystal and felt his consciousness expand beyond anything human minds were designed to handle. Suddenly, he was not just Jake Morrison from Earth. He was also Veltar of the Crystal Worlds, who had developed the first anti-devourer weapons. He was Zephyr of the Wind Dancers, who had perfected hit-and-run tactics against superior forces. He was dozens of other beings from across the galaxy who had given their lives in the final battle. The strain was incredible. Jake's human brain was trying to hold the memories and experiences of an entire civilization. But somehow he held on, drawing strength from his connection to his crew through Amy's psychic link. Lisa, Ryan, Sam, and Amy felt the knowledge flowing through their shared connection. Guardian tactical knowledge, weapons technology, and strategic understanding flooded into their awakening minds. They became more than human and more than individual guardians. They became something new. The change was immediately apparent in their fighting effectiveness. The fortress's weapons began targeting devourer vulnerabilities that the enemy had thought were completely hidden. Manufacturing systems that had been producing random Guardian weapons suddenly focused on creating specific tools designed for maximum effectiveness against dark energy beings. The devourer response came as a wave of psychic screaming that echoed through every mind in the star system. Impossible. The Guardian knowledge was destroyed. How do you access the memories of the dead? Jake answered through the psychic link, his voice carrying the authority of every Guardian who had ever lived. Because we learned something you never understood. The dead are not gone as long as someone remembers them. And we remember everything. The battle reached a turning point as Guardian weapons specifically designed for human physiology came online. The fortress began producing ships that could move like human fighters but strike with Guardian power. Energy weapons that could not be absorbed because they existed partially outside normal space. But the most important change was not in their weapons or ships. It was in Jake and his crew themselves. The genetic awakening combined with the memory core access had created something the galaxy had never seen before. They were Guardians with human adaptability, ancient knowledge with fresh perspectives. The Devourers had adapted to fight the original Guardians, but they had no preparation for what humanity had become. All ships begin formation attack pattern. Omega, Jake commanded, using tactical knowledge from 100 different Guardian species. Target their command vessels first. Cut off their coordination. For the first time since the battle began, the Devourer fleet began to fall back. Their perfect adaptation abilities were failing against opponents who combined ancient wisdom with new approaches to warfare. But Jake knew this was just the beginning. The main Devourer force was still approaching the system, and they would not be caught off guard like the advanced fleet had been. The real war was about to begin. The signals from the ancient structure grew stronger every hour. Jake Morrison watched his crew work frantically at their stations, trying to understand what the massive building was telling them. The Terra's pride had been sitting in the shadow of the structure for 2 days now, and strange things were happening. Dr. Lisa Park had not slept since they arrived. She sat at her station with cups of cold coffee scattered around her workspace, studying the complex patterns of light and sound coming from the structure. Her hair was messy, and her eyes were red, but she refused to rest. "The signals are getting more organized," Lisa said to Jake as he brought her another cup of coffee. "At first they seemed random, but now I think they're trying to teach us something." Jake looked at the screen where thousands of symbols scrolled past in patterns that hurt his eyes to follow. "Any idea what they're trying to teach us?" "Language," Lisa replied. "I think this is some kind of universal translator system. It's showing us how their symbols relate to concepts and ideas." Commander Ryan Bell joined them at Lisa's station. He had been monitoring the ship's defensive systems since they arrived, worried that the energy from the structure might be dangerous. So far, their radiation detectors showed normal levels, but Ryan was still nervous. "Have you figured out who built this thing?" Ryan asked. Lisa shook her head. "Not yet, but I'm starting to think it wasn't built by just one civilization. Some of these symbols match the markings we found on the wrecked ships. Different species, different writing systems, all mixed together. As if responding to their conversation, the structure suddenly pulsed with bright light. The symbols on its surface rearranged themselves into new patterns, and the Terra's Pride's computers chimed with incoming data. "Captain, something big is happening," called out Chief Engineer Sam Carter from his station. "The structure is opening, some kind of bay doors near its base, and I'm detecting movement inside." Jake felt his stomach tighten. "What kind of movement? Looks like ships or vehicles of some kind. They're small, maybe the size of our shuttles. 3 of them are heading our way." Jake's mind raced. They were alone in deep space, far from any human colonies or military ships. If whatever was coming out of that structure was hostile, the Terra's Pride would have to handle the situation by itself. "Red alert," Jake ordered. "All crew to battle stations. Ryan, power up our defensive systems, but don't target those incoming ships unless they show hostile intent." The 3 objects that emerged from the structure were unlike anything in human databases. They moved through space without any visible engines or thrusters, gliding silently toward the Terra's Pride. Their hulls were smooth and dark, almost like they were made of liquid metal. "They're scanning us," reported Communications Officer Amy Ross. "Very sophisticated sensors, much more advanced than ours." Jake watched the approaching ships on the main screen. They stopped about a kilometer away from the Terra's Pride and simply waited, as if studying the human vessel. "Are they trying to communicate?" Jake asked Amy. "Yes, sir. I'm getting signals on multiple frequencies. It's the same complex patterns. We've been receiving from the structure, but these are more focused. I think they're trying to establish contact." Jake took a deep breath. This was the moment that would determine whether first contact with an alien intelligence would be peaceful or hostile. "Open a channel. Let's see what they want to say." What happened next surprised everyone on the bridge. Instead of alien voices or strange sounds, the Terra's Pride's speakers filled with perfectly clear English words, spoken in a calm, ancient-sounding voice. "Children of the distant shore, why have you returned to this sacred place?" Jake felt a chill run through his entire body. The alien intelligence not only spoke English, but seemed to know something about humanity's origins. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the Earthship Terra's Pride," Jake replied carefully. "We're explorers. We detected energy readings from this system and came to investigate. We mean no harm." There was a long pause before the voice spoke again. "Earth, the small blue world where the survivors were hidden. We did not expect you to return so soon." Lisa grabbed Jake's arm. "Captain, they know about Earth. How is that possible?" The voice continued before Jake could answer. "You do not remember us, do you, children? You do not remember what you once were." "I don't understand," Jake said. "What do you mean by what we once were?" "Come aboard our vessel. There is much you must learn before the darkness finds you again." Jake looked at his crew. Ryan was shaking, his head clearly thinking it was too dangerous. Lisa was nodding eagerly, her scientific curiosity overcoming her caution. Sam and Amy watched him carefully, waiting for his decision. "How do we know you won't harm us?" Jake asked. "If we wished you harm, child of Earth, you would already be dead. Your ship's weapons and defenses are as toys compared to our capabilities. We could have destroyed you the moment you entered this system." The words were not spoken as a threat, but as a simple statement of fact, which somehow made them more frightening. "I'll come aboard," Jake decided, "but only with a small team." "Bring your seeker of knowledge," the voice said. "She will understand what we show you better than the others." Lisa looked confused. "How do they know I'm a scientist?" Jake chose Lisa, Ryan, and Sam to accompany him. The four humans took a shuttle from the Terra's Pride to the alien vessel. As they approached, a section of the dark hull simply melted away, creating an opening large enough for their shuttle. Inside, the alien ship was filled with soft blue light that seemed to come from the walls themselves. The corridors were wide and curved, designed for beings much taller than humans. Strange symbols glowed along the walls, constantly shifting and changing patterns. They were met by a single figure that made Jake's breath catch in his throat. It was clearly artificial, a construct of metal and light, but it moved with graceful purpose. Its body was humanoid, but stretched and elegant, with 4 arms instead of 2. Its head was smooth and featureless except for dozens of glowing points that might have been eyes. "I am the last sentinel," the construct said. "I have waited 50,000 years for your kind to return to this place." "Return?" Lisa asked. "We've never been here before." "Your bodies have not," the sentinel replied, "but your spirits have. You are the children of the first guardians, scattered to the edges of the galaxy when the great darkness came. The sentinel led them through corridors filled with displays showing star maps and images of battles fought long ago. Jake saw thousands of different alien species fighting together against something that looked like living shadow. The first guardians were the protectors of this galaxy, the sentinel explained. They came from many worlds and many species, but they fought as one against the devourers. "Devourers?" Sam asked. "Beings from the space between galaxies. They consume entire civilizations, turning their matter and energy into more of themselves. They came to our galaxy 50,000 years ago." The sentinel stopped in front of a large display showing a blue and green world that looked exactly like Earth. When the final battle was lost, a few survivors escaped to this small world. They used genetic modification to hide their true nature, becoming primitive and weak, so the devourers would not find them. Your ancestors chose to forget their power rather than risk discovery. Jake stared at the image of Earth. "You're saying humans are descended from these guardians?" "Not descended," the sentinel corrected. "You are the guardians. The genetic modifications your ancestors made were temporary, designed to fade after many generations. You have begun to remember who you truly are." Lisa shook her head. "That's impossible. Humans evolved on Earth over millions of years. The modifications included false memories and planted evidence," the sentinel said. "Your archaeological record was carefully constructed to hide the truth." The implications were staggering. If the sentinel was right, everything humans believed about their origins was a lie designed to protect them from an ancient enemy. "Why are you telling us this now?" Jake asked. The sentinel's glowing points dimmed slightly, as if showing sadness. "Because your presence here has activated ancient warning systems. The devourers will know you have returned. They are coming through the ship's walls." Jake could hear a deep humming sound growing stronger. On the displays around them, star charts began showing red warning symbols at the edge of the system. "How long do we have?" Ryan asked. "Days at most," the sentinel replied. "They have been searching for Guardian survivors for 50,000 years. Now they know where to find you." Jake felt the weight of impossible responsibility settling on. his shoulders. His simple exploration mission had become something much larger and more dangerous. "What do we need to do?" Jake asked. "You must remember," the Sentinel said. "You must become what your ancestors were before the Devourers arrive. The galaxy depends on it." Jake Morrison stood in the command center of the ancient structure, watching displays that showed the edge of their star system. 3 days had passed since the last Sentinel had revealed the truth about humanity's origins. 3 days of frantic preparation for an enemy that had been hunting them for 50,000 years. The structure was not just a monument or tomb as they had first thought. It was a fortress built by the first Guardians as their final stronghold. The last Sentinel had activated its systems when Jake and his crew arrived, bringing weapons and defenses online that had slept in the dark since the last battle. Dr. Lisa Park worked beside one of the Guardian control stations, her hands moving, over symbols that glowed in response to her touch. The genetic modifications in her DNA were responding to the Guardian technology, allowing her to understand systems that should have been impossible for any human to operate. "I can feel it," Lisa said to Jake as she worked. "The knowledge is there in my mind, like memories from a dream. I know how these weapons work even though I've never seen them before." Commander Ryan Bell was studying tactical displays that showed the Guardian Fortress's defensive capabilities. The weapons were beyond anything human technology could produce. But Ryan could somehow understand their operation as if he had trained with them his entire life. "Captain, the fortress has enough firepower to destroy a small fleet," Ryan reported. "But according to these readings, the Devourers usually attack in much larger numbers." The last Sentinel moved between the human crew members with fluid grace, helping them access their hidden memories and abilities. The ancient AI had waited 50,000 years for this moment, when the Guardian children would finally return home. "Your awakening is progressing faster than expected," the Sentinel said to Jake. "The genetic locks your ancestors placed in your DNA are opening in response to the fortress systems." Jake nodded, but he was worried about his crew back on the Terra's Pride. Chief Engineer Sam Carter and Communications Officer Amy Ross had stayed aboard the human ship to coordinate between the two vessels. If the Devourers arrived before everyone was ready, the Terra's Pride would be helpless against their advanced technology. "Sentinel, how much longer before the fortress is fully operational?" Jake asked. "The main weapon systems are online, but many of the manufacturing facilities are still activating. If we had more time, we could build ships and weapons specifically, designed for your physiology." "How much time do we actually have?" Before the Sentinel could answer, alarms began sounding throughout the fortress. The displays around them changed to show long-range sensor readings from the edge of the star system. "They have arrived," the Sentinel said quietly. Jake felt his heart pound as he looked at the sensor data. Dark shapes were emerging from what looked like tears in space itself. The Devourer ships were unlike anything humans had ever seen, made of what appeared to be living shadow that absorbed light instead of reflecting it. "How many?" Ryan asked. The Sentinel's optical sensors flickered as it calculated. "Initial count shows 57 vessels. More are still emerging from their dimensional gateways." Jake opened a communication channel to the Terra's Pride. "Sam, Amy, get back to the fortress immediately. The enemy has arrived." "On our way, Captain." Sam's voice crackled back through the speakers. "But sir, our sensors are picking up some very strange readings from those ships." "What kind of readings?" "They're not using any kind of propulsion we recognize. No engines, no thrusters, nothing. They're just moving through space like they're swimming through water." Jake watched the tactical display as the Devourer fleet spread out across the system. Their ships came in many different sizes, from small fighters to massive vessels that dwarfed even the Guardian fortress. But they all shared the same quality, of seeming to bend light and space around themselves. "They are beings of dark energy," the Sentinel explained. "They exist partially outside normal space-time, which makes them very difficult to fight with conventional weapons." Lisa looked up from her control station. "The fortress weapons are designed specifically to target dark energy beings, aren't they?" "Yes. But the Devourers have had 50,000 years to adapt and evolve. They may have developed defenses against Guardian technology." The first test came sooner than expected. A group of smaller Devourer ships broke away from the main fleet and headed straight for the fortress. Jake watched them approach on the display, noting how they moved in perfect coordination without any visible communication between them. "They're testing our defenses," Ryan said. "Standard military tactic. Send in a small force to see what kind of response they get." "Should we fire on them?" Jake asked. The Sentinel considered the question. "It would reveal our capabilities to the main fleet, but if we do nothing, they will assume we are defenseless." Jake made the decision. "Fire on the lead ships, but don't use our most powerful weapons yet." Lisa activated the fortress's outer defensive systems. Beams of energy that looked like concentrated starlight lanced out from the ancient structure, striking the approaching Devourer ships. Jake expected to see explosions or debris, but instead the enemy vessels simply absorbed the energy like sponges soaking up water. "The energy is making them stronger," Lisa said with alarm. "They're converting our weapons fire into more of their own mass." This was exactly what the Sentinel had feared. The Devourers had adapted to Guardian weapons during their 50,000-year hunt for survivors. "Switch to kinetic weapons," Ryan ordered. "Physical projectiles instead of energy beams." The fortress launched a barrage of metal projectiles at incredible speed. These had more effect, tearing through the shadow-like hulls of the Devourer ships. But even when damaged, the ships continued to advance, their wounds healing almost instantly. "They're regenerating," Jake said. "How do we fight something that can heal from any damage?" "With weapons they cannot adapt to," the Sentinel replied. "But those weapons require time to activate, and we must first survive long enough to use them." The small Devourer force reached the fortress and began attacking its outer defenses. Instead of conventional weapons, they used some kind of dissolution, ray that simply erased matter it touched. Sections of the fortress's outer hull began disappearing, creating gaps in their defenses. Jake felt a strange sensation in his mind, like a voice speaking words he could not quite hear. Around him, his crew was experiencing the same thing. "What is that?" Amy asked as she and Sam entered the command center. "The Devourers are trying to communicate," the Sentinel explained. "They speak directly to minds, instead of using sound or radio waves." The voice in Jake's head became clearer, speaking in a tone of ancient hatred mixed with satisfaction. "Little Guardians, you have returned to die where your ancestors fell. We have grown strong in the long years of hunting you. Your weapons cannot harm us now." Lisa gripped her control station as the mental voice continued. "We know you are the last. When we consume you, the galaxy will finally belong to the Devourers. No more hiding in the darkness between stars. No more hunting scattered survivors." Jake forced himself to respond, directing his thoughts toward the enemy ships. "We're not the same as the first Guardians. We won't make their mistakes." The Devourer response came with a sound like cold laughter. "You are children playing with weapons you do not understand. Watch as we show you the futility of resistance." The main Devourer fleet began advancing toward the fortress. Jake could see now that there were over 100 enemy ships, including several massive vessels that looked like they could swallow entire planets. The small attack force had just been testing their defenses. "Sentinel, we need those special weapons now," Jake said. "They are not yet ready. We need more time." "How much more time?" "Several hours at minimum. The manufacturing systems have not been active for 50,000 years. Jake looked at his crew. They were all experiencing the genetic awakening that came from exposure to Guardian technology, but they were still essentially human. They had human limitations and human fears. But they also had something the first Guardians had apparently lacked. Jake had read the historical records the Sentinel had shown them. The original Guardians had fought as separate species, each trying to protect their own worlds and people. They had cooperated, but they had never truly united. Humans were different. They had spent their entire history learning to work together despite their differences. It was what had allowed them to survive and thrive on Earth, and it might be what would let them succeed where their ancestors had failed. "All right, everyone, listen up," Jake said to his crew. "We're outnumbered, outgunned, and fighting an enemy that's had 50,000 years to prepare for this moment. But we have advantages they don't expect." "Like what?" Sam asked. "We're not trying to save our own individual worlds like the first Guardians were. We're fighting for the entire galaxy. And we know something about fighting impossible odds and winning." The Devourer fleet was getting closer. Soon they would be in range of the fortress's most powerful weapons, and Jake would have to decide whether to reveal their full capabilities or try to hold out until the special weapons were ready. Either way, the battle for the galaxy's future was about to begin. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Terra's Pride and watched the stars through the main window. His ship was far from Earth, farther than most humans had ever traveled. The year was 2387, and humanity had been exploring space for over 300 years, but they still found new things that surprised them. Today would be one of those days. The ship's computer made a soft beeping sound, and Jake turned to look at the screen. His science officer, Dr. Lisa Park, was already studying the readings with a frown on her face. She had been with Jake's crew for 5 years, and he trusted her judgment more than anyone else on the ship. "Captain, we're getting some very strange energy readings from the Kepler 442 system," Lisa said as she pointed to the screen. "The patterns don't match anything in our database." Jake walked over to her station and looked at the data. The readings showed massive amounts of energy coming from what should have been empty space around a small moon. The energy signatures were unlike anything human technology could produce. "How far are we from those readings?" Jake asked. "About 6 hours at our current speed," Lisa replied. "Should we change course to investigate?" Jake thought for a moment. Their mission was to explore this sector of space and catalog any interesting discoveries. The readings were definitely interesting and possibly important. "Set course for the energy source," Jake ordered. "And wake up Commander Bell. I want our tactical officer to see this." Ryan Bell arrived on the bridge 20 minutes later, still looking sleepy but alert. He was Jake's second in command and had a talent for spotting trouble before it found them. Ryan looked at the energy readings and whistled softly. "That's a lot of power for an empty system," Ryan said. "Any idea what could be causing it?" "Not yet," Lisa replied. "But the patterns are very regular, almost like they're artificial." The Terra's Pride was not a large ship by human standards, but it was well equipped for deep space exploration. Jake had a crew of 30 people, all experts in their fields. They had been exploring the outer regions of human space for 2 years, looking for new worlds and new civilizations. As they got closer to the Kepler 442 system, the energy readings became stronger and more complex. Lisa worked at her station, trying to make sense of the data. The patterns were definitely artificial, but they were unlike any technology humans had ever seen. "Captain, you need to see this," Lisa called out suddenly. Jake hurried over to her station. On the screen was a three-dimensional map of the space around the small moon. What Jake saw made him catch his breath. Floating in space were thousands of objects, arranged in perfect geometric patterns that stretched for millions of kilometers. "Are those ships?" Ryan asked, looking over Jake's shoulder. "They were ships," Lisa said quietly. "Now they're just wreckage. But look at the arrangement. This isn't random debris from a battle. Someone placed these wrecks in specific patterns." Jake studied the display more carefully. The patterns were beautiful in a strange way, like someone had created art from the remains of a massive space battle. But who would do such a thing and why? "How old are these wrecks?" Jake asked. Lisa ran some calculations on her computer. "Based on the cosmic radiation damage and dust accumulation, I'd say they've been here for at least 50,000 years. Maybe longer." The number was hard to believe. 50,000 years ago, humans were still living in caves on Earth. Yet, here was evidence of a massive space battle involving thousands of ships from that same time period. "Can you identify the ship designs?" Jake asked. "That's the strange part," Lisa replied. "I'm seeing hull fragments from at least a dozen different civilizations. Some of the metal alloys don't match anything in our databases. It's like ships from all over the galaxy came here to fight." As the Terra's Pride moved deeper into the debris field, Jake could see through the main window that the wreckage was even more extensive than the sensors had shown. Twisted pieces of metal the size of city blocks drifted slowly through space. Some of the ship fragments still had markings on them, symbols and writing in languages no human had ever seen. "Captain, I'm detecting something large beneath all this." "Debris!" called out Sam Carter from the engineering station. "The sensors are having trouble getting a clear reading, but it's massive, much bigger than any of the wrecked ships." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. First they had found the debris field with its impossible age and mysterious patterns. Now there was something hiding underneath it all. "Can you get us closer to whatever's down there?" Jake asked Sam. "It won't be easy. There's a lot of debris in the way, and some of it is still radioactive, but I think I can find us a path through." It took 3 hours of careful maneuvering to work their way through the debris field. Jake watched nervously as pieces of ancient metal the size of buildings drifted past their ship. One collision with those massive fragments could destroy the Terra's Pride instantly. Finally, they broke through the worst of the debris and could see what lay beneath. Jake had to grip the railing to steady himself. Rising from the surface of the small moon was a structure that defied belief. It was clearly artificial, but unlike anything humans had ever built. The structure was at least 50 kilometers long and rose 30 kilometers into space. Its surface was covered with symbols and markings that seemed to glow with their own inner light. "My God," Lisa whispered. "It's beautiful." The structure did have a strange beauty to it. Its lines were smooth and flowing, like it had been grown rather than built. But there was also something sad about it, as if it were a monument to something lost. "I'm reading massive energy sources inside that structure," Sam reported. "Whatever it is, it's still active after all these years." Jake made a decision that would change everything. "Take us closer. I want to get a full scan of that structure." As the Terra's Pride approached the mysterious building, Jake noticed that the energy readings were getting stronger. The symbols, on the structure's surface began to glow brighter, as if responding to their presence. "Captain, something's happening," Lisa said with excitement in her voice. "The structure is sending out some kind of signal. It's very complex, but I think it might be trying to communicate with us." Jake felt his heart racing. They had stumbled onto something incredible. This was the kind of discovery that would change human understanding of the galaxy forever. But as he watched the ancient structure come to life, he couldn't shake the feeling that they had also stumbled onto something dangerous. The signal from the structure grew stronger and more complex. Soon, the Terra's Pride's computers were filled with data they couldn't understand. Jake realized they were no longer just explorers who had found something interesting. They were witnesses to something that had been waiting in the dark for 50,000 years. And now that wait was over.